So welcome everybody to this meeting of Talking About Socialism. My name's Sarah Lawrence. Before we go any further, I'd like to remind everybody that we record these meetings. So if there is an issue about that, then feel free to turn your screens off, but be aware that it's being recorded. Welcome everybody. I would like to be able to say a particular welcome to Andy. I think this is the first time Andy's joined us.
No, I have been on calls before.
Sorry then, my
Right.
apologies.
Don't worry about it.
Ethan G is trying to join us, but without any success so far, but I'll keep an eye on that. So tonight we're having a discussion on now he's disappeared altogether. What's wrong with Labour, as in the Labour Party, and discussing can it be transformed? Can it be transformed into a vehicle for socialism, communism? What do we think about what's wrong with it? Is it the only, forgive me, trying to let Ethan in. Should trade unions be in or out? What do comrades think about disaffiliation? Is there any difference between the Labour Party and the Tory Party? Will there be any difference in terms of their, is there any difference in terms of their policies, manifestos? I know some of them haven't been published yet, but generally. And what about, would it be any different under, it seems like Labour's going to win the election, but will it really be any different to under the Tories? And what do comrades think about other alternatives to the Labour Party for the working class? And what can be done to build the ideas of socialism and communism in this situation? Oh, Ethan, I'm so pleased that you've got in at last after much trying. Welcome. So without more ado, with more ado, just two apologies from Will McMahon and from Ed Potts. And I will ask Nick Wrack to introduce the discussion for about 15 minutes, Nick, or do you need 20?
No, 15's fine. Can you give me a signal after 5 and then after 10?
Yeah, sure, we'll do. Fire away.
Well, thanks, Saraya, and thanks, comrades. The title of the meeting is a very direct question: what's wrong with Labour? And I'm sure that each of you has more than 3 minutes to say what you think is wrong with Labour. I'm going to go through a few of those things in a short while, but I didn't want to pass on the results that are coming in, the exit polls from the European elections that are coming out today, because it's an indication of the threat to what's going to happen in Britain after the next Labour government. My forecast is it's not unusual, but my forecast is that Labour is going to win. It's going to win quite heavily. It's going to come into all sorts of problems because it doesn't have a programme for providing any significant or serious reforms. And it's going to come into conflict with the working class in terms of the trade unions and the unorganised workers and the youth. And it will disappoint. And the question is, what comes next? And putting it frankly, if the left, and by that I mean the socialist, communist left, those of us that believe in presenting a complete alternative, a fundamental transformation of society, unless we get our act together and lay the formation of a new party, then the right are going to continue their march because they won't be challenged by anything that poses an alternative other than the one that they are presenting. And I've looked at some opinion polls, and obviously these can be variable, and comrades can comment on this. But in terms of Britain at the moment, Since Farage entered the arena, became the new leader of Reform UK and presented himself as the candidate for Clacton, Reform UK have gone up to 13% in the opinion polls. Most of that at the expense of the Tories, who are now on 22%. I might have got that wrong. The Labour is on 44%, which is a 22% lead over the Tories. It's a massive lead. But, and this comes on to the question of what's wrong with Labour, which I'll develop in a moment, throw out some thoughts for you to comment on. Another opinion poll that I saw in the Independent from just recently was an opinion poll from Techna UK. And it says that 20% of the electorate have already decided not to vote in the general election. Essentially a plague on both your houses. So John Curtis suggests that this abstentionism that's already well developed is partly down to the fact that the leaders have no personality, that's Sunak and Starmer, but primarily because people don't see any fundamental difference between the two. And it's the article called it apathy, but I don't think that that is the right word. I don't think it's people are apathetic about politics. I think they're disillusioned with the fact that the parties are the same or appear to be the same. And it says that abstentionism, that plague on both your houses, is highest among young people, what is known as millennials and Gen Z, 38% of whom have decided not to vote. And if you look at another statistic, 30% of 18 to 34-year-olds are not even registered to vote. So that's quite worrying generally from the point of view of politics. And it's a dire reflection on Labour under Starmer as to their lack of inspiration, their lack of any inspirational ideas, thought, personality, programme primarily. And so what's wrong with Labour? You could answer glibly everything. Those of you who watched the TV debate between Sunak and Starmer would have struggled to find any significant difference between the two, whether it's on the economy, whether it's on spending, whether it's on austerity. Labour and the Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves are basically emulating Tory fiscal austerity. On immigration, Starmer criticised Sunak for being the most liberal Prime Minister on immigration, a rather remarkable criticism from somebody who's supposed to be from a liberal party, that is the Labour Party. So there are all these things where you can say that it's basically coming back to Tweedledee and Tweedledum, Tweedledum and Tweedledee, whichever way you want to look at it. There is no fundamental difference. There's a little bit of tinkering on the edges over the question of public school VAT and this, that, and the other, but essentially it's just a little bit more pepper and salt on the same tired old dish. Nothing fundamentally different. And so it comes back to the question, really, what's wrong with Labour? It's not really those things that I've just outlined, which are symptoms of the disease, symptoms of the problem. It's the fact that Labour, in essence, is not and never has been a socialist party. So it's never been a party that has a programme or has had a programme for the fundamental transformation of society, abolishing capitalism, getting rid of capitalism. So all of these similarities between Sunak and Starmer, between Labour and the Tories, is a reflection that in this economic period, that capitalist program that has always been there is reflected in the complete lack of any significant difference between those two parties. And so that's maybe a talking point, because I know that a lot of people that came from the Corbynista left and who are now involved in the campaigns to unseat Starmer and supporting various left candidates, and I'm not criticizing them for that, but that a lot of the attitude that they reflect is, in a sense, a sort of personal disappointment that Corbyn has been defeated and that Starmer's triumphed, and that therefore the socialism of Starmer is no longer present. Whereas I take a different view, that Corbyn clearly was to the left of Starmer quite considerably, but his programme was still not fundamentally a programme for the abolition of capitalism. And you could point to various aspects of the manifesto to deepen that proposal. So the fundamental issue of what's wrong with Labour is its programme, its lack of posing a fundamental break with capitalism. So Labour, from its inception in 1900, was essentially a compromise between the socialist left, if you like, reflected in the trade unions to a certain degree and other socialist organisations, with liberalism. And the trade unions decided they wanted to stand their own candidates and form their own party, and broke organisationally with liberalism, but didn't break politically with liberalism. And that liberalism was continued in the Labour Party from 1900 onwards in the form of Fabianism, sort of gradualism, a little bit of tinkering here and there, change here and there to make capitalism work better and make capitalism work in a fairer way for ordinary working class people, or ordinary people generally. The problem with that approach, as we see today, and we've seen repeatedly in all the decades since 1900, is that capitalism is a system that can't be made to work in the interest of everybody, because we live in a class society. Capitalism is the system of the ruling class, the owning class, and it survives, and they gain through the surplus value that is created by the exploitation of labour. And so there's a class conflict at the very root of society.
5 minutes left, Nick, sorry.
And no amount of trying to square the circle will work. And what we have now is Starmer doing a sort of Tony Blair Mark II, a Peter Mandelson Mark II. Remember, Peter Mandelson said, you know, enrich yourselves. Everybody should go and become a millionaire. There's nothing wrong with being a millionaire. And Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, and Tony Blair have been doing an offensive, a charm offensive with big business, basically saying, we are your party. We are business friendly. We are the party of business. So the question is, what's the trajectory of Labour? Now, I know that there are going to be some differences and criticisms over what I'm going to say now. The question is, so how would we define Labour even now? I would say it's a party with a capitalist programme, a pro-capitalist leadership, but it's traditionally and historically been supported primarily by workers. And particularly, there's the trade union link. And so I would say it's a capitalist party with a workers' base, and I would say that it's a capitalist workers' party. I know that Barry, for example, disagrees with me on that, and I look forward to hearing his criticisms. And he says that the term a capitalist workers' party or a bourgeois workers' party is an oxymoron, a contradiction in terms. And in a sense, it is. It's a contradiction in terms that can't be reconciled. It has to go one way or the other. At the moment, if I were to give my assessment, the trajectory is clearly in the direction of becoming an out-and-out capitalist party. but it largely depends on what workers do and what the trade unions do. There's a question there about the trade union bureaucracy. The trade union bureaucracy, by and large, I don't want to write everybody off, but by and large, the trade union bureaucracy has protected and defended the pusillanimous approach of the leaders of the Labour Party. They've gone along with it because they hope to get some sort of tidbits. Just recently, it's a question of workers' rights, which is important, and I wouldn't want to minimise it. But they're allowing the trajectory towards the right in return for very little. Now, the culmination of all of this to end up, I've said what's wrong with Labour in outline. What's the answer? We've broken up this and the next meeting, and I don't want to trespass too much on the next one where we're looking at answers, but can't leave it left without posing an answer. That it's got to be the formation of a real socialist alternative, an organised socialist or communist party that puts on its banner boldly, clearly, confidently that we stand for the transformation of society, overthrowing the present constitutional and economic arrangements, getting rid of the monarchy, the House of Lords, getting rid of the senior civil servants, the army, the police, and instituting democracy, real proper democracy at every single level. And most important, taking over the means of production and using the wealth in society and the labour in society to produce for need, not for profit. And only if we do that can we stop the march of the far right, which has, as you will have seen in the opinion or the exit polls today, triumphed across Europe. In France, the biggest party, in Italy, in Germany, the ADF, the far right have gone from strength to strength. We have to stop that. And the only way we can stop that is by challenging capitalism and the product that breeds that far right and fascist ideology. I'll end there. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So I'll ask comrades to jump in. Questions, comments, opinions, just join in. Can't see any hands up. Put your oh yeah, that's I can. So Minnie first, and then I can see Barry's. So Minnie, and so what we do is 3 minutes first time round, and I'm sure you get a chance to come back in again. Okay, Minnie, fire away.
Yeah, I don't think Labour Party has ever been a socialist party, and it's even less left than it was obviously now. I noticed last night that one of the presenters, one of the reporters on the news was talking about the election results in Europe, and she was saying that Le Pen hadn't said much. She hadn't campaigned on much, and she hadn't said much. So basically, they're just obviously the Macron party. They're up against it. Capitalism is not working. Obviously, capitalism is end stage, and it's rotten ripe for revolution. It's not working. Mm-hmm. It's not benefiting the working class at all. And I note that the Starmer is doing a similar thing, and he is to the right. He really is to the right of what we had with Corbyn, a nasty, dangerous, disingenuous, lying a man. Yeah, I looked at the manifesto for 2019, and it's kind of very wordy, the Labour Party's manifesto, and obviously it was. A lot of people think it's Brexit what done it, but it's not really that inspiring, is it? And hardly socialist. And I noticed that the Workers' Party this time around, they're not socialist, but they've got some things that are a bit more inspiring. I saw one candidate who was talking about raising the personal tax threshold to 21,000, bring the pension age back down to 60, stuff like that. So, you know, that's something rather than nothing, which is what we got from the Labour Party. One good thing about the Labour Party, it's inspiring opposition on the left. I note the challenger to Emily Thornberry in Khan Ross, his name is. I think he's a Green. Is he a Green? He was once a British diplomat, and after the invasion of Iraq, he gave secret evidence to the Butler inquiry and resigned. He knew the government had lied, failed to pursue alternatives to military action, broken UN resolutions, and that changed his political views. And Gaza's changing a lot of people's political views now. And I think that's similar to what's going on in Europe. I think the right I've called on this. They certainly don't want war with Russia. I can't stand the right, but the centrist right are taking us to war. They're absolute out and out warmongers. Yeah, let's see. It's interesting as well in Germany. Can't help talking about European elections.
Minnie, can you just?
Yeah, I just finished the last sentence.
Yeah.
In Germany, the old historic West Germany voted Christian Democrat largely, and it was East Germany that voted Alternative for Deutschland. And within that, there was a city-country divide as well. I'll leave it at that for now. Run out of time.
Thanks, Minnie. Barry, unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. The Labour Party has always been an open capitalist party, and that was from the very beginning, the first Labour government. What the leaders of the party said then in 1924 was, we have taken over a bankrupt machine, in other words, the economy, and we've got to make it work. And that could have been said by Rachel Reeves, and has been, of course, in a different form of words, but the same sentiment. The economy and making it work for business comes first. Also, if you listen to MacDonald, if you read anything about MacDonald, Ramsay MacDonald, again, he openly proclaimed that the unemployed would not come first, either in terms of remedies or in terms of benefit. And what would come first is the restoration of trade. So openly capitalist, no attempt to hide it. Snowden, Philip Snowden is Chancellor of the first Labour government, joked that his budget had been called a Tory budget. And he celebrated that fact. He was proud of it. And he joked and he said, I believe they're building a statue in the financial sector to celebrate my budget. And he thought that was very funny. But again, unashamedly pro-capitalist. And, you know, every single Labour government has managed capitalism and has used all these kind of comments, sentiments to openly proclaim their attachment to capitalism and its institutions, Parliament primarily. And the Labour Party is primarily a parliamentary party. Its support has been electoral, but many workers have voted for the Tory party as well, as we know. Now, on this point about capitalist workers' party, it's not only an oxymoron, it's absurd. It's a phrase, it's a left reformist outlook, a phrase from left reformism. It's a phrase from the Comintern, at a period when the dictatorship of the proletariat in the Soviet Union was a dictatorship over workers, not a dictatorship of workers. And when the revolutionary wave in Europe subsided, all kinds of deals and compromises were made with social democracy. And that meant this is where this phrase comes from, that somehow or other indirectly the Labour Party.
Can you draw your remarks to a just to finish your sentence, please?
Well,
Not mid-sentence. It's all right. You can finish your sentence.
it's going to stay mid-sentence because, well, 3 minutes is not enough, but there you are.
Okay. Well, you can come back. It's not a problem. So what do comrades think about what's been said so far? We've got Kirsty has posted, I can't vote for all the main parties and we only have the Workers' Party. What does the group think of them? Points raised by comrades. Can you tax capitalism away? Is it possible to drip away? Where do the current so-called leaders of the Labour Party, not just in the UK but elsewhere, where do they come from? Because I'm just saying this because nobody's got their hand up at the moment, but just as food for thought. Because I think in the past we had people who were corrupted by being in power, where they came from the working class and had worked, and I mean working in a traditional working class job, and became corrupted by it. But now we've got people who are leaders of the Labour Party who've just never been within sniffing distance of a worker. Is that a problem, or is it just the same old, same old? Andy?
Yeah, thanks, Ray. I think this is an interesting discussion, but I'm going to try and hopefully add not a different slant on it, but just kind of outlining some of my current experiences and also some of the experiences of people that I know. Like many people, maybe not in this room, probably not in this room, my Labour Party membership is probably hanging by a thread. And if it wasn't for the fact that we had a nominally left-wing candidate where I live, then I don't think that I would be at all involved whatsoever. We've actually got other people in our constituency, very, very good lefts. And I'm not using Corbyn as a benchmark of leftism in that respect, not because I don't think he's a left-winger, but because they were lefts before Corbyn, if you get my drift. They weren't, if you like, Corbyn arrivists, to use a phrase you've never probably heard before. But anyway, they are obviously deeply disillusioned with what's going on, feel very, very conflicted over their continued presence within a party that frankly doesn't want them and is in no way radical, socialist, pick whatever left-wing adjective you want to use. That's patently obvious by the current state of what Labour's doing. And it seems to me that it's a deliberate strategy, and it has been for some time by the right virtue signaling, if you like, where they basically, all the things they've been doing is designed to empty the party of people that they don't want. And I think Nick is certainly onto something when he talks about the trajectory of the party and where it's going to end up, because it's only going one way, in my opinion. And the key issue is, where do socialists gravitate to? What should we be saying to socialists who are disillusioned, who are hanging by a thread, and yet there's nothing there for them to join, as far as they can see it. Now, we can think, well, okay, when we get the other side of the election and Labour fails to deliver, which obviously they will fail to deliver, what happens then? Will there be any move from the trade unions to try and force Labour in a different direction? That's kind of a question just to throw out there. Even if there was, would it make any difference? Because is the party now so, sort of tied up and bureaucratized that it's impossible to actually change it anymore? How will that pan out? I mean, myself, I think the question of a new organisation will be posed on the back of events, because that's the only way that it can actually come to the fore. But in the meantime, when you've got decent people who are still hanging on in there in the hope that after the election, something might happen, not straight away, but maybe in the short to medium term, how do we keep those people engaged and involved, or do we just say you're wasting your time, you might as well just leave, but leave for what? Because that's a conundrum at the minute, in my opinion.
Thanks very much, Andy. That's a really good question, and not an easy one to answer. Nobody else has got their hand up, so I'm Barry, if you'd like to come back in to continue the point,
Okay.
and then I'll give you some more time. And in the meantime, anybody else put their hand up? And it will be interesting as well. I've resigned from the party recently. Be interesting to hear what other comrades have done. But Barry.
Oh, just on this point again about the Labour Party, what kind of party it is, what is its nature. This point about it's a capitalist workers' party. Now, I think...
Sorry to interrupt you, Barry. Have you got a radio on or something?
What?
Have you got a radio or TV? Somebody...
Do you want me to, oh.
It's just it's interfering. I don't know if it's bothering anybody else, but it's bothering... I'll freeze your time. It won't eat into your time, but if you could just... Sorry.
Can you go to somebody else? I have to go in the other room.
All right. All right. If it's not bothering anybody else, I'll just...
John,
maybe go to somebody else.
All right. In that case, I'll call in Toby. Toby? Toby? Oh, is it Toby or is it... Sorry. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes. Can you hear us now?
Yes, thank you. Yep.
Right, there we go.
All I was going to say in relation to Barry's version of Labour Party history is that, look, there have been times, okay, particularly when it was in opposition, say with Lansbury, with Foot and with Corbyn, it was somewhat more left-wing than it has been under Blair or now under Starmer. So there have been variations over time, right? And also in the early years, it was possible for people to be members of the Communist Party and the Labour Party, and you actually had someone, an MP, Sackville Fowler, who was in both, right? So I think a slight oversimplification coming from Barry. Since I'm not in the UK, and for health reasons which I won't get into, unfortunately, I don't think I'll be able to come back at any point during the election. I'd like to if I could, but all I get are bits on Radio 4, but the sort of sense I have when the Labour Party says we want to build more prisons, we want to spend more money on defence, we want to keep out the immigrants. It's just sometimes it just appalls me. And I'm saying this, I'm still actually a member, having rejoined in November 2015, after having been out of it for about 20 years. I mean, I was in from 75 to 94 and then out and then came back in when Corbyn became leader. And I was sort of wondering, nothing I do in another country is going to make any difference, but if they had actually taken the decision that Diane Abbott couldn't have stood, I think I would have actually left in protest against that. But I don't actually see the point of leaving. Part of it is that sort of 20 years or so when I wasn't in, and when I was in various other things which I won't list, some of which some of you know me to have been in, it didn't seem to me that they made much difference, unfortunately.
Thanks, Toby. So Barry, we'll come back to you now. I can see, John, you've got your hand up, but I'll let Barry come back.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I mean, all the original leaders of the Labour Party were all liberals. Keir Hardie, MacDonald, Henderson, all liberals. And they had a link with the trade unions, who were liberals at the time, and the link with the trade unions had was with the Liberal Party. It didn't make the Liberal Party a bourgeois workers' party because it had a link with the trade unions. And the trade unions, I don't know, what's the nature of trade unions? The phrase inscribed on their banners, all kinds of Marxist and revolutionary slogans. It's a quote from Marx. But, the fact of the matter is that is just wishful thinking because the trade unions, were negotiating the terms of exploitation, not striving to end exploitation. The nature of trade unions is to live within capitalism and make it slightly better. But when push comes to shove, they take the side of the British state and British Parliament, and all the major industrial disputes. You can see that the trade unions, during the general strike, for example, failure to support the miners, and so on. And most of the time, the link with trade unions doesn't make the Labour Party a workers' party. It doesn't. It's the bureaucracy doesn't directly represent workers. It mediates between the capitalists and the workers. It doesn't directly represent them. So there's no organic link there. And as I said, I don't think we should base our assessment on old formulas from the 1920s based on insufficient or inadequate information about the nature of the Labour Party.
Right, thanks very much. That's some really interesting points, Barry. I've got John next. Can I just inquire, is it Minnie or going again, or Graham for the hand?
It's Minnie.
Okay, well, I'm going to call Janet in before you, Minnie, but I will call you back in. John, please go ahead. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi all. The Labour Party. Yeah, at what point would we say historically the Labour Party became more like, the American Democratic Party? According to Miller, the reason why they split, left the Labour Party, was because it had become a capitalist party. Everybody had their own ideas, I suppose, as to at what point it happened. There was always clause 4, which is always you had your card, and clause 4, and it said in writing, taking over the means of production and so on, but it would be a process. And as one of the speakers said, Fabianism, pragmatism, so on and so on. It was always there. So there was never originally any real what you call socialist party, as people have been saying, that the unions came out of the liberals and so on. But what surprised me a lot was the way that the Labour Party itself, which had voted something like 60% for Corbyn, could literally change so quickly and allow such a purge of the left. My own MP, Russell Moyle, apparently, because he said something 8 years ago on Facebook, he can't stand as a candidate. He has been, in our area, there is a certain amount of criticism, nobody's perfect, but generally speaking, for a left MP, he's been pretty good. But overall, the Labour Party have suspended him simply because he said something 8 years ago. We still don't know what it is. And so now, those who support Russell Moore in this area will be looking to vote Green. And of course, the other issue is this, right, the urgency of all this. Because what we're saying, I mean, I'm not attracted to the Workers' Party because it's just so, sounds to me very conservative left. Galloway says he's homophobic, he's so on and so on. Wants he doesn't want secular schools, so on. He wants a religious school, which is basically, what we got at the moment. So he's full of contradictions. So I think he's trying to appeal to two different camps.
All right. Can you just bring it
Two letters to his constituents, went out to that. So yeah, so the purge of the left, happened very quickly. Corbyn totally destroyed, and as I say, the urgency of building a left internationally and in Europe, and here, of course, which we are part of Europe geographically. Yeah, I mean, that's the urgency of it. Having a party which is actually going to get traction from what it says on the label, overthrowing capitalism. This is what we're about. That hasn't been tried for a long time. I mean, the Communist Party, the Communist Party tried it at one point, but it didn't work. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry to cut you off. I've just got other people with their hands up, but
yeah, that's fine.
So you'll be able to come back. Janet.
Yeah, thanks. I think I largely agree with what Barry was saying. And we all know that the Labour Party has only been about managing capitalism, and I think that's more obviously clear when we look at its relation to foreign policy. They've been imperialist without any exception, maybe during Corbyn's time, but actually he gave in really on a lot of those issues, or kept silent. And of course, those things aren't connected about capitalism and imperialism. But I just wanted, there were just one thing that I think I'm going to be contradictory about. But going back to what Nick was saying about the period after a Labour government gets in, I don't know if you said it was inevitable that there was going to be a kind of uprising. I don't think you used that word. There was going to be a response, a lot of opposition. I think there are some questions about that. Where is it going to happen? What's going to be the catalyst? Is it going to happen? If it happens, who is going to be leading that? It's not clear to me that it will happen. It certainly won't happen anytime soon. There'll be concessions to the trade unions, minor concessions, but concessions. And in terms of the economy, I mean, is it going to get dramatically worse domestically? Well, probably not for some time. So where is this crisis? But I think in contradiction to that, what Minnie was saying about the opposition, it is quite interesting that there's been a growth of opposition to Labour before the election, coming from lots of different angles. And is there some optimism there about being able to build on that to grow something else without even there being a major crisis? Except, is that opposition really based around Gaza? And why shouldn't it be? They should be never allowed, it seems to me, to be in government ever again because of Gaza. But if it is around Gaza, then is that going to dissipate? Or is that opposition about Palestine, about Gaza, has it actually opened the to a wider picture where people are beginning to see that it isn't just about the horrors that are happening in Palestine. It's not clearly not just about Netanyahu, but it's actually where people are beginning to look at it in the context of imperialism and so on. So I'm not sure what I think really. I guess I think there isn't going to be major opposition for some considerable time, but there are the foundations for that, if that can be built on. And actually, I know that Nick always ends with saying we need a new party, blah, blah. Of course we do, but the question is, how do we get there? And maybe that's what we'll be talking about next time.
Thanks very much, Janet. Ethan. Can't see you. Oh no, Ethan, can you hear me? Can you unmute yourself? Can I unmute you? Don't know that I can. Ethan, you've got your hand up, but I don't know if you can hear me. Hello? Oh, Ethan, I think you were unmuting yourself then. Try that. If you click on where the little microphone is, at the bottom of your screen, we should be able to hear you. Oh, hang on. He's gone. All right. Oh, that's a shame. Okay, well, what I'll do is I'll call Minnie in and we'll hope that Ethan actually gets back into the meeting because he's actually disappeared now. All right, Minnie, fire away.
Yeah, Starmer's lightweight manifestos coming out. Is it midweek or something? It's rumoured to be 30-odd pages compared to the 2017 manifesto for Corbyn was 128. Now, I don't mind a few pages as long as it's got some great stuff in there, but it won't have. Obviously, the Tories have gone us corrupt. They're literally shitting in the rivers and on people. The game's up. Just funneling money up to the rich constantly. A lot of it through COVID when people were dying, and still are actually. Ed Davey of the Lib Dems, politics is a theme park. He was in a fairground today. So politics is fun. Hey, look, we're having a laugh. It's a theme, it's a theme park. Starmer, distant, liar, me. I was DPD, don't you know? My dad was a toolmaker. He really owned the factory. And the disingenuousness of the warmongering, the support for Israel over Gaza absolutely disgusts me. And Starmer says he recognised Palestine. This is a new thing, isn't it? When there's peace, when's that going to be? Will that ever be? The way Starmer is going on, it won't be. There's no originality among any of them. I left the Labour Party due to the ex-Israeli spy being brought on to surveil people's social media. There was no free speech. Capitalism is surveillance. We have surveillance capitalism. I note that Unite, the trade union, has not, it didn't approve, it wouldn't sign off the Labour Party current manifesto. Trade unions, it's just, I work for one, and I think a lot of it now, obviously it's great, the strike wave, and like Ethan was saying in the chat, and I think a lot of that was driven by the cost of living crisis, though. It had to be, didn't it? The trade insurance companies, so if people get in trouble, they can ring up and, we can liaise with the manager sort of thing. And the freebies, the cheaper, get some things cheaper, get your house insurance a bit cheaper, maybe, stuff like that. One guy who was a senior organizer where I worked, we have a suspension bridge that was built, and there was a toll to go over it, and disabled people, didn't have to pay, and he was outraged. As a senior organizer in a trade union, that disabled people didn't have to pay the toll fee. He was literally outraged. He went on social media to say so. Shocking. yeah, we were saying last week we need a party of the left, a Marxist party, a communist socialist party. We've got the disaffected youth that Nick was talking about. We've got climate change is never going to be solved by capitalism. It's always going to make a profit. We've got the people who don't vote, who are disaffected, who aren't being offered anything.
Can you just finish that
The left
sentence?
has nowhere to go. I'll end it there. Thank you.
Sorry. What it
Right.
is, I know Andy's going to have to leave, and I was just quite hoping he could come back in briefly before he has to leave the meeting. And I think Ethan's coming back in, hopefully. Andy, fire away.
Yeah, I'm not sure I had anything more to say. I put a little
Oh,
thing
right,
in
sorry.
in the chat there, but just to reinforce this thing about, you know, where are we and how do we orientate and all the rest of it. I've got very good friends who up until about 5 days ago were looking forward to helping to run a campaign for a left wing, what would have been a left wing Labour MP, but Faisal Shaheen got booted out in Chingford and Woodford Green. And the two people I'm talking about there, Nick knows who they are, Helen Watson and Mick Moore. They are now running her independent campaign and have both resigned from the Labour Party. They didn't necessarily think they'd be in that position, but obviously things moved quickly and they had no alternative, and neither did Pfizer. You know, I'm not going to go into the disgraceful decision that was made by Labour. We know what they're like. But, you know, maybe, and actually, she might win, judging by some of the returns that I'm hearing on the canvases. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. And I think, you know, we can dust off templates that we've used in the past, but actually future events might not actually bear them all out. You know, I don't know how things are going to go. I haven't got a crystal ball. So it will be interesting to see, you know, what happens. But I think Nick's right. Labour will win big, and then we'll have to wait and see. But anyway, yeah. But that for me is actually, you know, helping to colour my thoughts as well, because I'm quite jealous of them now, even though we've got a decent-ish MP in our area. Because I'd rather be going on the stump for someone who you can really believe in. Do you know what I mean? But anyway, there it is.
Thanks, Andy, and good to see you again. Okay, well, look, oh, Ethan had got back in again, and now he's just hovering. In the meantime, hoping that he'll get in and be able to speak. Kirsty has posted, I can't see, oh yes, I can see Kirsty. Think it's time for the unions to come away from the Labour Party, which is, did you want to expand on that, Kirsty?
I was just basically putting in the chat the same as Andy, but I was just saying that I don't think Labour have got the same trust with the unions anymore. I know they never really did in the first place for a long time since Blair came in, but I think it's just get worse. And that's basically what I was saying about it, because I was in a union myself, like many, and it was the Oyster Union that I was in, but it's not the same. It's not the same as it used to be. That was all. Thanks.
Thanks, Kirsty. I mean, I think that a comrade raised, and forgive me, I can't remember who it was, but was saying about what the trade union leaders will do and whether they will set up parties. My own view, regretfully, is that even the best of the left don't want to. Oh, sorry, I keep Ethan's poor thing. I don't know what his connection is, but it's in and out. Even the best of the left trade unionists, and there are very few of them, do not have the just don't have the gumption to actually lead something. And I think it is a crying shame that's obviously not a point of wringing our hands, but that people who have got influence, I just think there is no other time than now to do it. I think people could have done more under Corbyn and didn't. and so I can't actually see it coming from the left, in the few left leaders that there are in the trade unions. So it's difficult. Ethan, are you? No, I think Ethan is still joining. John, is that your hand from before, or is it up again? Unmute yourself.
No, it's now.
Okay, great. Well, look,
If
if you start off, and then if Ethan actually gets in, I might be very rude and interrupt you, but go ahead.
All right, I didn't want to say too many things, but I agree about the unions. Yeah, I mean, even Mick Lynch, says he's reformist, and that why do we want another party? We've got so many of them. So that's his view. The situation regarding the honeymoon that Starmer may have, it depends on how long that's going to be, doesn't it? I mean, Rachel Reeves is on about growing the economy by basically us subsidising capitalism. The idea of new technology, outfits that would grow the economy, and that the way this would be done would that the public would put in a third of investment into these startup tech companies, and supposedly get the profit back. There was no talk, of course, about the fact that we'd have any representation on the body as a third, as a shareholder, actually owning a third of it. That's been going around for a while. I mean, whether they actually carry that through or not, I don't know. But it's, that seems to be the idea. So that's where supposedly growth is going to come from. How long that's going to take, and whether it actually ever happens, who knows? But the honeymoon, yeah, we'll see how long that is. He maybe kicks out of bed very quickly, but it may take time.
Oh, sorry.
But either way, the other issue I'd like to bring up is that there are a lot of parties who are now calling themselves communist parties, have been for a long time. My issue with a party would be, are we calling ourselves communist stroke socialists, or are we calling ourselves communist Leninists or Marxist Leninists, whatever, Marxist, Trotskyists? Because I think that's not a good idea. That's it.
I didn't quite catch the last words. You think that?
I'm saying that the idea of calling our party we set up calling it anything but communist stroke socialist, because many of these communist parties see themselves as Leninist Trotskyist, and they say so on the label, and Stalinist even now. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's a good point. Ethan does not seem to be able to get back in. So I don't know if comrades have had the chance to read what he said. He said, and by now I'm afraid I can't remember who he was agreeing with, but he said, I agree with the last comrade. I think it's interesting that the strike wave we've just lived through had happened despite the collapse of Corbyn. I think it shows a disconnection between the Labour Party and the working class. Also, Corbyn wasn't just defeated, he betrayed the working class by his refusal to fight. So those are some interesting points, and I think on the point of Corbyn, if I can just abuse my position, I think that he, hang on, I'll turn on my time. I think that I agree with what Ethan said, because I think that Corbyn allowed himself to be defeated. He made the fatal mistake of not understanding the nature of the party, the Labour Party, and the majority of the not the people who joined enthused by a left-wing leader and the possibility of having a left-wing leader, but those in positions in the party, MPs and the majority of councillors and so on, that, oh, hang on, maybe he's coming in. I think that he fundamental things like leaving people in positions of power whose very intent was to get rid of him as swiftly as they could. So I think he was incredibly naive. I find it very difficult to understand how somebody who spent so long in the party could not have understood that they would have knives in his back as soon as possible. I'm going to cut myself short because Ethan, you are here. Are you able to speak? Unmute yourself. Finally got back in. Ethan? Ethan, can you unmute yourself? Can you hear me? I can't actually unmute. I don't know why. Ethan, can you hear? Can you put in the chat if you can actually hear me? Or is it that the connection's so bad that you can't hear at all? No. Okay. Okay, so Ethan is with us, but not able to hear or speak, I don't think. So I've forgotten now what I was saying, but I think that yes, that he was so naive and had no idea really about the battle. So I agree with what Ethan was saying in the chat, that he and poor Ethan's, obviously his connection must be awful because he's gone again. That he defeated himself really. ABCs, you do not leave your enemies who are ruthless in power, and the point is that he had the question of having the power to have, I've forgotten what it was called now, but MPs being up for reselection, that it wasn't an automatic selection, so there's a potential for there was a huge possibility to have left-wing MPs. All of that was completely squandered, and it is absolutely unforgivable in my point of view, from my point of view, what he did. Thank you very much, Millie. Open selection, yes. And, you know, that's a basic thing. It wasn't exactly being revolutionary to suggest that. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, nobody's got their hand up. Nick, do you want to come back in? Oh, no, sorry, Barry. Yep. Unmute yourself, Barry. Barry?
Yeah.
Yeah, got you.
In terms of the future, I mean, it's very concerning if we have a Starmer government, because he's got these really close connections with the security agencies in Britain and the United States. We remember he was in charge when, and he had very close links and meetings with American state officials, which kept Julian Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy for 7 years. He also refused to prosecute MI5 and MI6 agents who were involved in torture with the Americans in the rendition program. And of course, there was Jean Charles de Menezes, who was shot and killed by MI5 agents, and he refused to prosecute them. The investigation into Blair Peach, again, he refused to prosecute despite huge amounts of evidence of how Blair Peach was murdered. And of course, the spy cops, again, he was involved in not taking prosecutions against them. But the main thing that is worrying is that he's so closely involved with the state security services in America and Britain that he's going to drag us into their war drive against China and Russia. On this point about, just finally, on this point about Corbyn, well, I mean, Corbyn was very much in the parliamentary left tradition, a focus on Parliament, an orientation on Parliament, which means unity within Parliament, making concessions and having unity with the right wing, and betraying the membership, not getting directly involved in class struggle outside Parliament. And that's been characteristic of the left throughout the years, from the early ILP left. So, you know, I think a point was made earlier by one comrade that because there was left-wingers in the Labour Party, somehow it didn't make it a capitalist party. Well, unfortunately, none of these comrades, none of these Labour lefts, including Corbyn, got anywhere near to socialist politics, extra parliamentary socialist politics and class struggle. And that was the point about the origins of the Labour Party. It was never involved in class struggle because its founder, Keir Hardie, didn't believe in class struggle. He believed in, as indeed
Thanks,
might.
Barry,
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
okay.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to cut across you for 1 minute because
Yeah,
Ethan is back. I'm so sorry. Ethan's back and it seems like he's
Right.
unmuted. Ethan,
Okay.
are you able to hear us and to speak? Ethan? I'm sorry, Barry, obviously, even though Ethan's back unmuted, I don't think he can hear us. Hear me. Ethan? Sorry. Okay. Ethan? All right, Nick, I'm going to ask you to come back, I think, because I can't get, can people hear me? No, Ethan, we can't. Can you hear me? Can you hear us? I can hear a rustling, Ethan. That might have been Barry, who I've just muted. Ethan? Very much wanted to hear from you. I'm sorry. Okay, Nick, I will call you in, please. You okay with 15? Well, you'll have to be.
Yeah. Really excellent discussion, loads and loads of points. Obviously, we don't agree on everything, but that's the nature of things, and we should just keep having these discussions because we need to tease out the differences and the consequences of the different positions and so on. I just want to make it clear in respect of the points that Barry's made that, first of all, we share an assessment of the history of the Labour Party. We just don't share how we characterise the Labour Party. So I don't disagree with anything that Barry was saying about Labour governments or about the historical approach of the left in the Labour Party. In fact, Ralph Miliband's book, Parliamentary Socialism, is not a particularly theoretical book. It was written in the 1960s, but it's a very good book that I would recommend because it goes through how in every single decade, faced with the question of a forthcoming election, the left in the Labour Party always capitulated to the right, lowered its reformist banner in favour of not rocking the boat, so to speak, and that applied to Tony Benn and to Corbyn as well, as Soraya has outlined. Corbyn, once he was elected, invited his murderers, if you want, into the cabinet, and they duly obliged. And he's got nobody to blame but himself. So I agree with Ethan in his comment. And again, just to bring things up to date, it is remarkable. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn is standing in Islington North, and I hope that he wins. And there'll be lots of people going out to campaign for him to try to make sure that he does. But it is remarkable that it's 5 years, if not longer, since he stood down as the leader in the defeat of the election 2019, 2020, almost 5 years. And in that time, he's done nothing, absolutely nothing to organize his supporters into a force generally known as a party. done nothing. And so what we're faced with now, and this is maybe what we're going to have to discuss or will be discussing in the next meeting, we're faced with a plethora of different organisations, including the Workers' Party of Britain, and I agree with people's criticism of Galloway and that party. I think it's a very potentially dangerous development and shouldn't generally be supported. There may be one or two candidates that would form an exception. And then we've got, because of the failure of the left to, and particularly Corbyn, to take any organisational initiative, which again I argue is in the nature of his politics, we've got a plethora of independents. And to my mind, it's an indication that there is the potential for something to develop in the future. But having independent candidates is not an indication of strength. It's an indication of weakness. It's the fact that, you know, we've got people presenting themselves, some of them very good, excuse me, some of them good, and no doubt with good intentions, but to whom are independents to be accountable? Who decides on the programme? If they were to succeed, which I don't anticipate will be the case, except perhaps for Corbyn and maybe some others, to whom will they be accountable? Well, if Corbyn wins, he will get onto the back benches and he'll just be Jeremy Corbyn. And that's not what we need. We don't need individuals. We don't want the idea that one person is going to make a difference. We need a party that's going to penetrate into every single nook and cranny of working class life. And I don't make any apology for banging on about that same point, because it's absolutely essential. Now, how is that going to come about? Well, I'm not a tea leaf reader. I'm not a soothsayer. I can't predict the future, but I think Andy Walker's comment in the chat, which echoed what I was saying, is one perspective that I think has got some substance to it. If you look at Starmer's lack of any alternative economic strategy from the Tories, and what is inevitable, in my opinion, there's going to be a tax on the NHS with privatisation of the NHS. More money is going to be diverted towards defence, as John mentioned. There's going to be clamped down on protesters, whether it's from the climate protesters or others. There is a crisis in local government that we discussed some time ago, where local authorities are faced with bankruptcy, services going to the wall, disappearing, no major reform. So people on benefit, people unemployed, sickness are going to come under the cosh, and the same will happen with regards to conditions of work, pay, etc. I can't predict the time scale upon which that will unfold, but notwithstanding the ability, or the attempt rather, of trade union leaders to keep it under some control, my expectation is that will turn into struggle between workers and youth and a Starmer government. We can then factor in what Barry's been talking about, the authoritarian nature of Starmer, his lack of toleration of dissent, and what that's going to do. What's going to be the reconfiguration of the party system at the top? Farage wants to basically take over the Tory party. Will we have a smaller Tory party but more right wing, with Reform UK and the right wing Tories coming together? Is it possible that Starmer does a version of Ramsay MacDonald and entices more, if you might call, Blairite Tories into the Labour Party, become some sort of national party, national government. What is lacking in all of this is a clear party. John put it, that unashamedly puts on its banner the overthrow of capitalism and argues for that. Now, this brings me back to the question of the nature of the Labour Party and why I think it's important. I think it's important because we need to make sure that, I'm not suggesting that for one moment that Barry's arguing this, but there is a danger. And the Lenin's, I know Barry has differences with me over Lenin, that should perhaps feature in, at some time in the future. But when Lenin wrote his pamphlet, Left-Wing Communism and Infantile Disorder, it was to try to counter the argument that sections of the communist movement in Britain had, which was completely hostile, for good reason in a sense, completely hostile to the Labour Party. But instead of drawing a differentiation between the Labour leaders and the Labour government and the working class supporters of the Labour Party, they cast the same blanket condemnation over the whole lot. And if we are to change society, we communists have to become the majority political force inside the working class. And that means we have to engage with workers, the majority of whom at this stage look to Labour. It's reflected in that opinion poll. We may not like it. And there clearly is an opposition to Starmer's Labour Party at this stage in advance of the government. But that is still a small section of, if you like, the advanced section of the working class, or an advanced section of the working class that has seen through Starmer and seen through the Labour leadership. The majority of the working class will hold its nose and vote for Starmer, and some will vote Labour in the expectation, certainly the hope, that things will improve. Our task is, one, to consolidate communists into an organised force. So we need to discuss how we can do that. What steps should we take? Who should we be talking to? But we also need to find a way through that organised force to talk to other workers who don't yet agree with us, who think that it's possible to manage the system. And we should not talk down to them or condemn them for being naive or stupid, that we know better. We shouldn't be arrogant at all. What we need to do is engage, firm in our ideas and firm in our principles, but friendly in our approach to them, being involved in struggle alongside them and pointing out the things that have been raised in this meeting, why struggle is inevitable under capitalism. It's not enough simply to win one battle. We need to win the battle to change society completely. And for that, it will take time to win the majority who will vote Labour over to our ideas. But I'm very confident that patiently explaining with the urgency that we require, we will be able to persuade others who do not yet share our ideas. Thank you.
Oh, wow, you had three minutes to spare, Nick. Thanks very much indeed. Well, I think that's been a very good discussion, and obviously it is an ongoing discussion. Comrades, we've got, leading on from this is the next meeting, which is on the 24th of June. What do we say about the Jeremy Corbyn Labour Party 2019 manifesto? So Minnie began that, as it were, this evening. What about the Left and Independence Programme and Challenge? Is their programme sufficient? What do communists say? And then on the 8th of July, we'll have a review of the election results and the tasks for socialists ahead. And again, comrades have raised this evening, and it's an ongoing discussion. How can we bring a new working class socialist communist party into existence? And Kirsty's put in the chat, can't we call the new party Socialism Party and discuss it with the left people in the party? We'll have a wider discussion on that. 22nd of July is will be an assessment of the European election results, who gained, who lost. We moved it further back than we'd originally intended because of the general election here, but be a discussion on what it means for the working class across Europe and what we should be doing here to try and avoid the what's happened there, where the far right parties have gained a dramatic increase in support. And then the next two meetings, it's the 5th of August. Originally in the programme that you've had, it's been the other way round, but now we've had confirmation from the speakers' availability. So it's going to be on the 5th of August. Isaac Rose, who is a writing and housing activist, who will be talking about his new book, Manchester and the Making of the Neoliberal Metropolis, the Rentier City. And then on the 19th of August, Aolung Yu will introduce a discussion on Is China Socialist? Aolung, I don't know if my pronunciation is probably terrible. Aolung Yu is a Labour campaigner and writer based in Hong Kong, who recently moved to London. He had a book published in 2012 called China's Rise, Strength and Fragility. His most recent book is Hong Kong in Revolt, the Protest Movement and the Future of China, published in 2020. So those are the next two, forgive me, the last two of the next programme of discussions. So I look forward to seeing everybody next time, and thank everybody for coming. And it's a real shame about Ethan. Let's hope we can get in touch with Ethan and ask if there are any solutions to his being able to participate in a more meaningful way, that we can actually hear him. For those who may not be reading, Virginia has posted, thanks very much, great to hear there's going to be a discussion about housing. And I'd just like to thank everybody and look forward to seeing you next time. And thanks, Nick, for the introduction, and thanks everybody for the really, for me, very stimulating discussion that we've had. And obviously all of this is not just about having a discussion, but it's about the practical steps that we need to take as a result of the conclusions we reach in these discussions. So all the best, comrades, and see you soon.